All right, welcome back, Cowboys and Giants fans. We're here with the absolutely awesome Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants to talk about this Giants season. Patricia, it's been quite the year for the Giants. I just don't know what else to say.
It has. And you could tell by looking at my face that I'm exhausted from this team. Seriously, a lot of people think that, oh, the media loves to cover a losing team.
That's not
We
true.
do not.
Not true at all.
We do not. It is exhausting. It is mentally draining, and it is not fun. So, unfortunately, the Giants, having blown it last week against the Chargers, they are guaranteed their fifth straight losing season. And how much more can this poor fan base take? It's been almost a decade, except for 1 year. It's been primarily a decade since this team has been any good. And it's just so frustrating.
I know I'm not supposed to say this as a Cowboy fan, but the NFL is definitely better when we have like a good Giants team because it makes these rivalry games like the Cowboys and Giants just way more fun, right? When they actually mean something. Not to say that this game doesn't mean anything for Dallas, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like these games are a lot more fun when it's battling for the top of the NFC East.
Yeah, exactly. Because we can all trash talk with each other. We can't do that. Giant fans can't say anything because they're not good. And it's not just with the Cowboys, it's with the Eagles and the Washington football team. So it's like you sit there and you go,
I know. It's all right. Well, we could talk about this game, but that's actually not that interesting to me. I want to talk about the Giants long term. So let's go through some different things. Dave Gettleman. Do you think he's back next year, or do you think this is officially his last year?
I think he's out after this year. I think he's going to retire. The Giants are going to let him walk out with his dignity. I think, whether he wants to retire, I kind of get the impression he does. But
he's in his 70s, isn't he?
I'm sorry?
Isn't he? He's like in his late 60s, early 70s, right?
Early 70s.
Yeah.
I think he's 71 going to be 71. But look, he came in here, did his best. But 4 years later, the offensive line is still a mess. His one-loss record is not very good. Some of his decisions, he's had some good ones. I don't want to totally, trash the guy. He's had some smart decisions. He's had some smart drafts, but he's also made some head scratchers. And there are just so many I can list here. So it's time to kind of just start over, get somebody in here who's a little bit more new school, somebody who's up with the trends of the league today, because the trends that I think Dave Gettleman follows might have been applicable back in the 80s, the 90s, maybe even the early part of the century, no longer are applicable, I think, right now. And they just need somebody who's progressive.
All right. What about Joe Judge? So this is it'll be year 3 in 2022. Do you think he's back?
Absolutely. I definitely think he'll be back. Judge, it's interesting. He spoke to us this week, which, he does every week. And just the way he was talking, I kind of got the impression that when he was interviewing for the job, he kind of spoke with team ownership and said, look, this is a process. This is not going to turn around in a year. It may not turn around in 2 years. I'm going to need time to do this right, because this is how it was in New England. This is how it was in Alabama. That's just the impression I got. And then there's the other thing. And I don't know how much this is going to factor into the equation, but the Giants have 1 more year to go on Pat Shurmur's contract. Mm-hmm. I can't see them wanting to pay out Shurmur, wanting to pay out Joe Judge. Now they got to pay a third head coach, plus pay out whatever is owed to Dave Gettleman. That's just throwing money away. I don't see that happening. But, Joe, the record hasn't been good, but, and I don't like to use this excuse because it's not an excuse. Every team has it, but you look at some of the injuries the Giants have had, and oh my God, I ask, can any team function? If you lose your starting quarterback, who I get it, he's not, Tom Brady, he's not Dak Prescott, he's not Aaron Rodgers, but you lose your starting running back, you lose your starting quarterback, you lose half of your offensive line, which wasn't very good to begin with. And now you've got backups basically in there. You lose your key inside linebacker. Your receivers can't get on the field. I mean, Daniel Jones and his weapons have been on the field this season for 6 snaps. Yeah. That's unheard of. So, again, I don't like to use that as an excuse, but it does bear a mention.
But you're seeing it in Dallas, right? Like Dak Prescott has struggled when he hasn't had all of his receivers on the field at the same time. He's used to throwing to 3 or 4 guys, and when they're not on the field, it certainly hampers him. So I completely understand. I want to ask you about Daniel Jones. So the Giants picked him in 2019. This is year 3. They have to make a decision, I believe, in this offseason about the 5th-year option. As we stand now, do you think the Giants are going to pick that up?
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's funny. Earlier in the year, if you had asked me this, I would have said, "Oh, absolutely," but I wouldn't do it now. And there's 2 reasons why. Number one, the biggest one for me is the injury factor. This guy gets hurt every year. Okay, we got spoiled with Eli Manning. Eli Manning never got hurt, never missed a game because of injury. But Daniel, look, I appreciate that he wants to be the tough guy, but good Lord, you've got to be smart out there. You can't, if you're taking off as a runner and you're constantly lowering your shoulder, and exposing your head and your neck area, you're going to get dinged. And I said this when, back when he got dinged before in the Cowboy game earlier in the year, I kept saying somebody's going to hit him and he's going to get dinged. And sure enough, he did. And I kept saying it even after he came back, when I saw him lowering the head and the shoulder, and I would scream out, slide, because, fine, you want to run. That's great. But slide, for Pete's sake, put your legs at risk as opposed to your head and neck, which is, a very delicate area. But yeah, I mean, Daniel at this point, I think, and probably a new GM is going to make this decision, because like I said before, I don't think Dave Gettleman is back. So a new GM coming in doesn't have any loyalty, if you will, to Daniel Jones, doesn't have to, protect the fact that he made that draft pick. Daniel Jones has improved a little. Has he taken the big step forward that I think they were hoping he would take? No. Is part of that because of the injuries? Yes, I think you can make that argument, but also part of that is on Daniel. And I think just all those factors considered, if I'm them, let him play out year 4. If he does really well, franchise him if you have to keep his rights. I don't think Saquon Barkley is going to get a big term contract if he continues to get injured. And if he does, then, if he gets through a year and has a banner year, you deal with that. You cross that bridge if you come to it, which I don't think they will have to. So no, I would not pick up Daniel Jones's 5th-year option.
A last question for you. And I know that we're a long way away from the offseason and the draft, but you kind of even mentioned it. You think like just let next year be a year where you have Daniel Jones in a make or break it year. Do you think the Giants will probably use their 2 first-round picks to upgrade their offensive line and just their pass rush in general?
They better upgrade that offensive line. I mean, they better. If they don't, I guarantee you're going to see an angry mob march to East Rutherford and want to burn down that building. So
you got to give whatever quarterback is back there, you got to give him a chance.
You have to. Exactly. I mean, look, let's go through that Giant offensive line. Andrew Thomas, I think, is a keeper at left tackle.
I agree.
Left guard, they have Matt Skura. Not a fan.
Journeyman.
Billy Price, a former number 1 draft pick of the Bengals. Ask yourself, if he was so good, why did the Bengals trade him?
Correct.
A number 1 draft pick. All right. Right guard, Will Hernandez, who was a high draft pick, I think a second rounder for the Giants a few years ago, looked great as a rookie, but hasn't looked good since. And dagnammit, he can't pick up a stunt to save his life. It's just been frustrating. And then you have Nate Solder at right tackle, who's been, I hate to say it, he's been like a turnstile. And then Matt Parrott, who's also looked kind of shabby. So they better update that offensive line, because that unit has just been bad.
All right, everybody, make sure you follow Patricia on Twitter. Is it at Patricia Traina, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Patricia _.
Patricia _Traina, the absolute best Giants follow. I promise you're not going to find anybody better. Check her out on the Locked On Giants podcast. You can also check her out on, is it Giants? It's Giants SI, correct?
Giants Country.
Giants Country.
Yep.
Giants
Country.
Country.
It's Giants Country at SI. So
okay. Well, this is an interesting matchup in Week 15. Patricia, I mean, I hope the Giants turn around, but you know that I don't truly mean that. But I'm trying to be
not this weekend at any rate.
Not this week. After that, this week it's fine. Can't wait to talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Giant fans, to the crossover section of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, I am Patricia Traina, and joining me is Marcus Mosher. He is one of the co-hosts of the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And Marcus, you're having a grand old time down there in Dallas. First place, you can clinch the playoffs. I am so jealous of you guys.
Well, thank you. It's been a weird year for the Cowboys. The Cowboys have won the last 2 games, and you would never know it by the way that this team is covered over the last couple of weeks. You know, people are just they're worried about Dak Prescott. They're worried about the Cowboys losing offensive coordinators, and meanwhile, they have a chance to still be the number 1 seed in the NFC. So it's a crazy time to be a Cowboy fan.
Sure is, but at least you guys are winning, which is more than what we in Giants country can say. But hey, listen, nonetheless, we still got games to cover. We still got stuff to talk about. And this weekend, the Cowboys come to MetLife Stadium for, I don't know if you could call it the rubber game, but it's the second of the 2 annual season series against the 2. Cowboys won the first one way back in week 5. And let's talk a little bit about the Cowboys. And I got to start off by asking about Dak Prescott, who looks like he struggled a bit lately. Do you see a recurring theme behind his struggles, or what's going on with Dak?
It's a really, really fair question. And I think the answer is complicated. I think it's a lot of things. It's the offensive line they've been moving pieces around. Tyron Smith has been out. He just got back, and now he's out this week. They changed their left guard. They've been changing their right tackle. So there's been no continuity on the offensive line. None at the receivers, right? Like last week was the first week we saw Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup really all together. And those guys didn't play particularly well. They were running some wrong routes. They were running routes at the wrong depth. And Prescott just is making some bad reads. So I don't think it's anything physically wrong with him. I don't think it's anything mentally wrong. It's just they're in a little bit of a slump right now. Things aren't clicking as well as they were earlier in the season.
Now, carrying that Cowboys team has been their defense. Let's talk about that, because I think at the start of the year, I believe you guys had some concerns about that defense. I think it was the back end that concerned you, but that unit's been playing lights out. What has been the big difference for that unit?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that the Cowboys are a defensive-minded team right now, where they want to, play ball control football and rely on their defense, because that's not the way it's been for the last couple of years, right? But it's absolutely true right now. They forced 4 turnovers in back-to-back games, and it's really because of their pass rush, right? DeMarcus Lawrence is back. Randy Gregory is back. Micah Parsons is still rushing the passer at an incredible rate. They're able to get pressure with their front 4 and front 5 guys, and it's taking a lot of the pressure and onus off the defensive backs, who can now be aggressive and know that the ball is going to be coming out hot and all that kind of stuff. So it's really the play of their defensive line that's really transformed this team.
Now, speaking of Micah Parsons, a lot of Giant fans are like, they wonder what could have been had the Giants put at 11 and taken Micah Parsons in the draft. But I believe when he first came out of Penn State, there might have been some questions by some people about whether or not he had it in him to be like a full-scale pass rusher. He has shown that ability. Is it something that the coaches have done to bring that out of him, or is it just a matter of comfort? Or what do you think's been the key for him suddenly getting on this tear of his?
That's a really, really good question. But I first want to ask you this before I get to that. How do Giants fans feel about the Parsons thing? Because obviously they traded back and they got Kadarius Toney, right? And Toney's been good when he's been healthy, and they've got another pick coming next year in the first round. But what's the general feel from Giants fans about how they handled the first round of last year's draft?
Well, everything, hindsight's 2020.
Of course.
Kadarius Toney has been injured. He's on COVID now, second time this year. So some people look at him and say, "Oh, bust," and some people look at the pass rush or the lack of the pass rush and are like, "Well, we don't have a pass rush." So just think if we had Parsons, and now we've got to face him twice a year. So I think it's split, but that said, I think it's going to make things a lot better when they find out where the Giants are drafting and where that Bears pick is going to fall. And right now it looks like it could be definitely in the top 10, possibly 2 top 5 picks. That I think everybody would sign up for that, I would think.
It's also helped that Azeez Ojulari has been pretty decent as a second round pick, right? Like he's at least giving them something. But to talk about Parsons, it's really complicated because the Cowboys liked 2 cornerbacks better than Micah Parsons in the draft. They liked J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain. They were upset when those guys were off the board and they traded down and took Parsons. And the only reason they took him because he was the best player available. It wasn't like they thought he was a generational pass rusher. They just thought, hey, this is an athletic off the ball linebacker. Let's take him and let's see where it goes. He really only started to become an edge player out of necessity. In week 2, DeMarcus Lawrence was out with a foot injury. Randy Gregory was out with COVID, and Dorrance Armstrong was banged up. So they had really no choice but to use him as an edge rusher. And because he played so well in that game, they've kind of left him there ever since. So it would be really nice to say, yeah, the Cowboys had this long plan. They envisioned him as the edge rusher when they drafted him, but it's just simply not true.
Amazing how the Cowboys kind of fell into this, right? Mm-hmm. It sounds like it was all, I guess, by accident, if you will.
Yeah, and if you think of just one thing that different happens, if the Panthers don't trade for Sam Darnold, they probably draft Justin Fields, and that means J.C. Horn falls to them at 10, and they're not picking Micah Parsons at 10 or at 12 in a trade back. So the draft is crazy. It's so unpredictable, and that's why we love it.
Yes, indeed. Now, I want to go back to the offense, if I could, for a second here. Zeke Elliott has not looked like Zeke Elliott. And I think I read something about, there was some talk about possibly shutting him down, and the Cowboys poo-pooed that. But what's going on with Zeke, and should they shut him down? Because he just hasn't been, I guess, the guy that, you're used to.
It's a really fair question. I think he should be shut down. It's pretty clear he's not healthy. He hurt his back earlier in the season, landing on a pylon when he was diving for the goal line. And then he hurt his knee the following week. Since then, he's just lost all of his explosiveness. And there was a report that the Cowboys were thinking about shutting him down for 2 or 3 weeks just to get him healthy. It's a bone bruise that's probably not going to heal by the end of the season, but they feel like it's, not necessarily something that rest is going to improve. So might as well throw him out there for 10 to 12 touches a game. I don't really understand it, Patricia, because I think Tony Pollard is a better player at this stage in his career, but he's banged up as well. He tore his plantar fasciitis. So he's going to be, limited the rest of the season. Cowboys just aren't getting a lot of production from their running backs right now, and it's really unfortunate.
Indeed. And you need that strong running game to keep the play action going and the passing game going, and keep some of the pressure off of Dak Prescott, who has enough pressure as it stands with the struggles that he's in. Now, speaking of the offense, there was a report, I think I saw something about Kellen Moore and the Chicago Bears if Matt Nagy is fired. What can you tell us about that? And are Cowboy fans worried about losing Kellen Moore?
It depends on the week. Like after last week, I think people are like, you can leave Kellen Moore. You're not a big deal after the offense struggle. But I mean, he's still really good. I think he's one of the best offensive coordinators in the league. I got a feeling that Kellen Moore is going to be very picky about the next job that he takes. I don't think he's just going to take the first head coaching job that's offered to him. Is Chicago the right fit for him? Maybe. I mean, I could see it with a young quarterback, and some weapons on offense, but I do think there is some concern that Kellen Moore could leave. It might not be this year. He's only been a coach for like 4 years. I think he needs a couple more years to grow before he takes a job like that.
All right, Giant fans, still more to come on today's show. But first, if you are looking for some colorful and comfortable apparel, you've got to check out Stance. Founded in 2009, Stance's apparel represents a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, and active apparel. With a focus on comfort, quality, and creativity, Stance brings you a new look that fits your lifestyle and your preferences, featuring some of pop culture's hottest collaborators for the ultimate in style and comfort. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in, so that those that feel good do good. And go see for yourself. Check them out, stance.com. Use our special promo code Locked On, and you will get 15% off your first purchase. Again, that's code Locked On. Apply it at checkout at stance.com for 15% off your entire order at stance.com. All right, Giant fans, still more to come on today's show. But first, it's the most wonderful time of the year as college football gears up for its playoffs. The NFL playoff race is taking shape, and the NBA and NHL are continuing to keep us warm through the winter here in the Northeast. And no matter what sport you like, BetOnline has you covered all holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website at betonline.ag and sign up today to receive a 50% welcome bonus with the promo code Locked On. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers that they have available. Visit BetOnline today and get your 50% welcome bonus with the code Locked On. All right, now I want to go back to Micah Parsons because this kind of ties into something with the Giants. Parsons and Saquon Barkley, former teammates at Penn State, best buds. Barkley said something today that kind of irked me a little bit. And I like Barkley, don't get me wrong, but he compared Parsons and said, well, actually he didn't compare it. He said some of what Parsons does is very LT-like. And LT, of course, Lawrence Taylor, who in my opinion, the greatest linebacker ever to play the game. I mean,
I agree. Yep.
How many times did, Bill Walsh have to come up with creative ways and new ways to slow LT down? Same thing with Joe Gibbs. That said, let's, just sticking back with Micah Parsons and what he does well. And the now that he's in the conversation for, defensive player of the year, also defensive rookie of the year, where have you seen the most growth in Micah Parsons' game?
Yeah. So Patricia, we did a podcast, was it earlier this offseason, about Eli Manning, whether he's overrated or underrated. I will never, ever say that Lawrence Taylor is overrated. I think he's the best defensive player in NFL history. So there you go, Giants fans. I don't hate all your players, I promise.
If you had said he was, I would have put an email out there and you would have gotten a flood of nasty emails.
No, Lawrence Taylor is absolutely incredible. And if you haven't, if you're a younger fan, please go to YouTube and watch him, because that guy is the most terrifying defender I've ever seen. I get why people are comparing him to Lawrence Taylor. It's because Lawrence Taylor is the last rookie to win Defensive Player of the Year, right? And he's not just a pass rusher. You could put Lawrence Taylor wherever on the field and he was going to win. He's just that type of athlete, that type of football player. I think that's what a lot of people see in Micah Parsons. I really think he's grown just as a playmaker. Like, he just finds ways to make big impact plays when they absolutely need him. He still needs to get better in coverage. He needs to get better when it comes to being an off the ball linebacker in some of his run fits, but the guy just has a knack for making big plays. And I think that's why you hear guys like Saquon Barkley make that comparison.
Well, that and plus he probably hasn't seen Lawrence Taylor play. Some of those YouTube
He's like 23 years old.
Could not believe he said that. I was like, and again, he didn't compare and say, oh, Mike is the next Lawrence Taylor. He said he saw qualities, I guess, that were very LT-like. And I'm like, no disrespect to Micah Parsons.
Yeah, that's a sacred comp right there.
LT is like in a whole nother universe, in my opinion. Right. And I saw him play growing up. So let me ask you about Mike McCarthy, because I think when we last spoke, there was still some, I guess, uncertainty about Mike McCarthy, if he was going to, I guess, come into his own, get to that comfort level, because there was some rockiness with the new coaching staff, bringing in new members of the coaching staff. Can you talk a little bit about the growth you've seen from McCarthy this year? And do you think he's finally kind of settled into that cowboy mode?
I do. I don't think Mike McCarthy is the best coach in the league. I don't think he's obviously in the Bill Belichick or Andy Reid tier, but he's just a really good coach, and he's very reliable. And there's really no games. There's no, there's no silliness around the Cowboys with him. Everything is about winning. Everything is about, trying to be competitive on Sundays. He does get his team fired up for these games. Like, he knows how to push the right buttons to make sure his team is fired up. Like, you might think it's a little childish to guarantee a win over Washington in a Week 14 game, but I kind of got the sense that McCarthy thought, hey, we need a little bit of a motivational bump. We're in the middle of the season. I'm putting this out there so you guys will go out there and back it up. I think he's just a really, really good coach.
All right. Now I'm going to ask you this question. I know it might touch a little bit of a nerve, but I got to ask it, because there is a belief that even though the Cowboys are in first place in the NFC East, they haven't really beaten anybody decent. And that includes the Giants, by the way. So I'm not, just so you know, I'm not totally dissing it. But when you look at what the Cowboys have accomplished, I mean, I guess a win's a win, but Are you a little concerned about the competition that they've beaten versus the competition they haven't beaten?
A little bit, but I think you can do that with every team in the league, right? You look at, some of the other wins that maybe like Green Bay has. They beat the Rams, who weren't fully healthy. They beat the Cardinals on a Thursday, and I think you can kind of pick apart a team's wins and losses all year long. I think the Cowboys do have good wins, like at New England, at Los Angeles against the Chargers. Obviously, they slipped up against Kansas City and Denver and the Raiders, and I don't know how they did that. It's still mind-boggling, but I think all that really matters, Patricia, and especially these playoffs, is just get to the playoffs, try to get somewhat healthy. And you never know. The NFL is so up and down. It's so random. I just don't think style points necessarily matter all that much. So I think you could be right. We'll just see how much of an impact it has when we get into January.
All right, now let's talk the game here. In terms of the Giants, they're banged up. They will not have Daniel Jones. They've got some guys now who tested positive for COVID. The secondary I'm concerned about because they won't have Adoree Jackson, who's got an injury. Aaron Robinson, who had been starting for him, he's got COVID. He's probably not going to play. Xavier McKinney was designated as a high risk close contact. So I'm concerned about that defensive secondary. Looking at the matchups here, where do you see the favorite matchups? Cowboys offense versus Giant defenses. I would guess that passing game might be the key there, but or do you see something else as a key?
Yeah, and one of the guys that you didn't even mention, Leonard Williams, he hurt his elbow. I saw that he might be able to play in this game after, they got some bad news early on. They think is he going to play?
We don't know. It's actually a triceps injury. So not quite the elbow, but it's in that area, obviously.
That's the one that I think the Cowboys could take advantage, because Leonard Williams is just such a good player, and he's given the Cowboys fits before. And I know they have Dexter Lawrence and they have some other guys in there that are good players. I don't think any of them are at the caliber of Leonard Williams. So if the Cowboys can run the ball on this Giants team, if they can throw the ball over the middle across, in front of some of their linebackers, I know like Martinez is out for the year. So that means more Tay Crowder and Reggie Ragland. I think the Cowboys offensive line should have some success against this front seven of the Giants.
All right. Flipping it. Giants offense, no Daniel Jones, no Kadarius Toney. That offensive line is should be a feast for the Cowboys, I would think, right?
You would think so, and especially if the Giants are really considering swapping in and out quarterbacks. We saw reports that Jake Fromm might play at least a little bit. I don't understand that, but
I don't think that's going to happen, but I could be wrong. I mean, unless it's a blowout or something. But...
Okay. Well, that's good. At least there's some rational coaching there. So I would think the Cowboys pass rush should be able to affect Mike Glennon in this one, because it's just a mismatch between the offensive and defensive line. However, it's not like the Giants are void of playmakers, right? Saquon Barkley is back. I know he missed practice on Wednesday, but I think it's fair to assume he'll probably play. He got hurt early on in the last Cowboys game, like within one of the first plays of the game. They have him, they have Kenny Golladay, they have a couple other receivers. That always makes you a little bit nervous, but the Cowboys defensive line, I think, should almost win this game by themselves.
All right. What's your X factor for this game?
Yeah, for me, it's Terrence Steele, the left tackle for the Cowboys. So Tyron Smith is going to miss this game with a high ankle injury. Terrence Steele has been up and down as a left tackle. In one game against Denver this year, he had allowed 9 pressures. He was atrocious. The next week against Kansas City, he was better. But I'm curious to see if the Giants can take advantage of that. Can somebody like Azeez Ojulari, give him fits on that left side? Because if he can, you can really slow down the Cowboys passing offense, because Dak Prescott's just not handling pressure very well right now. Keep an eye on Dallas's left tackle in this one.
All right. And then final question for you, Marcus. The Giants obviously beat up. They're, not doing very well. Very easy to overlook this team, a trap game, I guess is what I'm getting at. Do you get the sense that maybe the Cowboys are, especially after coming off of last week's big win against Washington, and I forget who the Cowboys have after the Giants. I think they have NFC East.
Washington.
Washington. Yep. Yes. So do you get the sense that maybe there might be a danger of them looking past the Giants, given how beaten up they are?
I think it's possible, especially when you consider that this is the 3rd straight road game for the Cowboys. They have never been good, like during the 1:00 Eastern games. Like They just always start slow. However, I think I'm going to come back to this pass rush. When you have a defensive line that can win at so many different spots, it's just tough to imagine that the Giants are going to put up 21, 24 points. I believe they're averaging like 17 and a half points per game. I think the Giants would really need to score in the middle 20s, high 20s in order to win this game. I think there's a chance, Patricia, that we have a game like going into the third and fourth quarter, and it's like 17-13, and the Cowboys offense is struggling. But I do have a hard time believing that the Cowboys are going to let this one get away.
They need it in order to I think they clinch if they
clinch if they win this game. Yes.
Yeah, I think they're in control of their own destiny. Am I not mistaken?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whereas if the Giants lose, they're officially out. But nobody's anticipating they're going to make it anyway.
Yeah.
We're all pessimistic now.
It's a long season. Listen,
Yes,
as a Cowboy fan who experienced this last year, the season just feels so long when you're basically been out of contention since week 5 or week 6. It's
what about when you've been out of contention since 2011? Gosh.
That's not true. You guys made the playoffs in 2016.
We had the one good year, but still, this is the 5th straight losing season for the Giants. So it has been a long haul. I mean, oh my goodness. But anyway, Marcus, great stuff. Giant fans, make sure you tune in to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. I will be on with Marcus talking Giants. Make sure you tune back into the Locked On Giants podcast tomorrow. We're going to wrap up the week with another show. Topic to be determined. So for Marcus Mosher, I am Patricia Traina. Thank you so much for tuning in to this crossover edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. And we will catch you on the Locked On Giants podcast tomorrow.